voice is so nasally. Sorry. I think it's quite good going after a break. I hope you're all sufficiently bearded up, so if I mess this up, you won't even know. So like I said, I've just graduated from Kingston. I did graphic design and photography, and it was touched on earlier. I think it's a really interesting mix of the kind of disciplines of design, but with the sort of freedom of photography in the art world. So my work, I'm very much centered around the experimental side of photography. I think it's worth mentioning that before all of this, I thought I was going to be a scientist. Growing up, this guy was kind of my hero. If you don't know who he is, he's Dexter, and he has a lab in his room, and he conducts all these weird and wonderful experiments. So tonight I'm going to talk about 3 of my own. The first one's called Inside Out, where me and my friend Josh Lake ate 35mm film. The second one's called Forge, where I kind of wanted to travel the world from my kitchen table. And the third one's called Zero, and I used like 500,000 volts of electricity to print with. So first it's Inside Out. So right at the very end of our first year, me and my best friend Josh Lake, we sat down and we were given the brief outdoor. And so within about 5 minutes, we were really sort of fixed upon the idea of taking something from the inside of our bodies and bringing it out. And as photographers, naturally, the best way we thought of doing this was with film. So our idea is that the emulsion on film is made up of gelatin and suspended silver crystals. And we thought that if we ate it, the gelatin would sort of be dissolved away by our bodies and leave an impression of our insides. So we kind of researched all the dangers that could come of this. And surprisingly, it's got nothing to do with the chemicals that are in film. The biggest danger is the shape, the size, the fact that it's razor sharp. Like if anyone's handled negatives, you'll know how sharp they are. So once we knew all of that, we went into town and we decided to pick a film. And it seems really bizarre to pick a film on its potential flavor. And we ended up choosing a really bog standard Fuji Superior color film. And we brought it back into the studio. And the way that we got around all the dangers of eating it was we cut off one single slide each of 35mm film, and then we cut the corners off, and then we rolled it up. And then this roll was placed inside a little plastic band to stop it from like opening out and cutting our insides up. So I rang my mum just as before we were about to do this, bearing in mind she's a nurse. And I was like, oh, Mum, we're going to do this project. And she was like, oh, you stupid. Like, what's this got to do with graphic design? I mean, she had a point, but we did it anyway. So we were in the studio, and we both had our film, and we were sat opposite each other, and we just took it in turns. We had a pack of Walkers on the side and a cup of water. And I remember the instant, like literally the instant that it was on the back of my throat, like from the point of no return, that it was probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever done in my entire life. But there was no going back. So after that, we just waited. And we kind of waited. And it's in this moment that your mind plays so many weird tricks on you, because you pay such acute attention to just anything that's going on in your body. Any rumblings that would probably happen anyway, you think, oh, it's exploded and my insides are going to be spilling out. Which kind of leads me on to the biggest question we always get about this project, is how do you get it back? There's no way to kind of brush over this. So what we had to do was every time we needed to go to the toilet, we had to poo in a bag. And like wear some like big like kind of marigold rubber gloves, and just feel through it. And the reason why the band that we put it in to hold it was so brightly colored is just so we could see it. So a couple of days after doing that, we both got our film, and then it was just a case of how do we make these into images? So we got them properly cleaned to get rid of anything that kind of shouldn't be on there. And we looked at them and we couldn't quite believe what they looked like. They had bubbles all over the surface. They were creased. And then we decided, well, how are we going to show these images? And because this project became much more about the surface texture of film, not using it in a traditional sense, we ended up getting hold of one of these like £2 million electron microscopes. I don't know who this guy is. I just got this image from Google. And here they are inside the chamber. There are the 3 images that we got on the 4th of May, 2012, 7 minutes past midday. And what this allowed us to do was take lots of images over the whole surface of the film to then stitch together and blow up to the ridiculous size that we needed them to be. And we got these. And here's a couple of details. I always think, maybe it's just me, but I always think these look like galloping horses. I think they look like horses. I can't not see horses, and yeah. So here's another one, just a detail from the first one. And here's where you can see kind of all the layers that have been eaten away. And there's some like twists going on. And here they are printed. There's Josh. And I mean, I won't get into printing. It's possibly the most difficult part about photography, I find. Who's a photographer in here, by the way? I really want to know. Is anyone a photographer? Raise your hand if you're a photographer. Okay. So not many. Great. So when we'd finished this project, we sent them out. We'd never done anything like this before. So we put them online, and we kind of just waited, and it was a kind of a silly project. And then within 24 hours later, this happened.
Well, it was certainly an original idea for a project as part of a graphic design and photography course. Two first-year students at Kingston University decided to record how the insides of their bodies alter materials by eating 35mm film and letting their internal organs do the rest.
So that was really, really, really bizarre. And like, my entire family were watching this, and they still have no idea what I do. So, I mean, this was a massive point for me and Josh, where we realized that just the power of showing your work and being really outward-facing. But we found out it works in both ways. This image found its way online. It was part of our sort of internal research that we were putting together to sort of explain the idea to our tutors. One way or another, this got online, and we got this email. It says, "You've got a foreign body, I presume a piece of film, in the lower left lobe of your lung. That piece is not in your esophagus, it's in your airway. That potentially is not good news. Are you coughing? Thanks, please let me know. Alan, radiologist, Chicago." Thanks, Alan. I'm fine. Yeah, so now I think we're a little more like adept at making something a bit more bulletproof before we send it out. So that's Inside Out. So the next project is called Forge. And this project really differs from Inside Out in the sense that it stemmed just from an observation. I keep an Instagram of sort of things that look like other things, be it ice cubes that kind of look like a galaxy or rising bread that looks like the moon. As a matter of fact, I'm a massive baker. So like, I'm really used to handling flour, and where this project really started with was I was making pizza, I think, where I had it all out on the surface, and it really looked like a kind of alien landscape. So I took it off, whacked it on the kitchen table, grabbed a light, grabbed camera, and took a picture, and I got this. And I couldn't quite believe like the amount of depth that you can get out of something that's so small. I mean, the trick to making small things look pretty big is I ended up using a tilt-shift lens, which allows me to essentially get everything from the front right to the back in focus. So after I did that one, I made these like really tiny, crappy drawings of other ones that I might do. But I found that if you draw something really small and then blow it up, the kind of composition is really strong. So here's another one. I mean, it's very difficult to see on a very bright projector, but there is a splash of water there. So this one is made with just a rock that I just found around the house. I mean, my house is falling apart. And then there's sort of salt, and in the background you can't really see it, but there's shaving foam in there and cling film. And I mean, this is super, super, super low budget stuff. I mean, I'm not the first person to do something like this. You know, model makers, film people do this all the time. But I thought it'd be a really interesting exercise in making something from nothing. So here's the last one I'm going to show. I've got to kind of speed through this. So I wanted these kind of sand dunes, and it's funny, with this one, something kind of funny happened. Is I've got one of those spider plants, and as you know, the ends of them just die. And it fell on, and it made this like tiny little sort of figure, and I thought it gave it this really lovely sense of scale that I didn't notice until I looked at it on the computer afterwards. So here's that one. It's just a piece of card and scored down the middle and put up in the middle. And it's funny with this one, I'm kind of like, as you can see in the picture, I'm kind of blowing up the side of the thing and pressing the camera button at the same time. I didn't have the luxury of an assistant. And here they are again printed. I mean, they're about, I think they're 6 foot tall on the larger side. And with this project, again, I sent it out. I had a bit more work at that point. And I didn't really know what to expect. And then within a week, I got an email from the Saatchi Gallery of all places. And I rang my mum up and I was like, oh, Mum, again. I was like, oh, I got in the Saatchi Gallery. And she was like, oh, amazing. Can you steal me a handbag? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, you know, handbags, watches, Versace make those, right? And still, to this day, like, still doesn't know what I do, but she's getting there. So that was forged, and this is the last project I'm going to show you. This is called Zero. And Zero was something I did in my 3rd year, and this goes right back to my sort of physics roots. And I'm like obsessed with electricity and energy and how that can be visualized. I mean, here's lightning slowed down to the point where you can see all those tiny branches that only exist for a split second. I was really kind of captivated by this and figured, like, how can I use this? How can I sort of display this? Can I print with it? And turns out that's what these do. Just laser copiers, they print with electricity, and I found this, like, absolutely incredible. I mean, I won't go into too much detail, I won't bore you about how these work, but essentially they charge the image to be printed on a roller, and then the toner powder, you know, sticks to that electricity, that static electricity, and then gets printed off and heat sealed. Hence why it's so warm when it kind of comes out. So I thought it'd be really interesting to copy that process, to try and figure out if I could show just what electricity looked like. What does static electricity look like? So after like tons and tons of failures, like making ecstatic generators out of like Copperberg cans and mugs and batteries and stuff, I ended up with a working method that took about 2 months to put together. So what I ended up doing, this is the first experiment I ever did, was I had this big piece of acrylic and used this 500,000 volt generator to zap this thing. I mean, this is also super low budget in the sense that I've got this plastic PVC pipe, which is the only thing between me and this without shocking me. And then once that made the static electricity on the top, here's a little close-up, it was then a case of dusting it with toner powder. And I couldn't believe that, like, this just showed up, like this image out of nothing just showed up. And then it was a case of printing this, just putting paper on the top and lifting it off. And it ended up getting these. This is what electricity looks like. And what's funny doing this project is that none of these are the same. No two can ever be alike, because when I print them, the static field just disappears. So you get all these different shapes and sizes, which, funnily enough, are determined by the weather, of all things. I found that in January, when it was raining, if it was raining, I couldn't get an image at all. And here's a little close-up. So I made sort of hundreds of these different ones. It was a case of just making as many as I could, and then just editing, just like any photograph. And then, I mean, it's difficult to see there, but I made these really, really, really large ones. That's 3-4 meters long, and here they are at the end of my degree show. So those have been the past 3 years of my uni experience, and I think making this was really strange for me, because I never thought about, like, why do I do this? And I will always come back to 2 words that were said to me in the beginning of the first year. If I was stuck with a project or didn't know if something was right or something was wrong, my first year tutor, Zelda Malan, who I owe everything to, just said, just forget everything else, just wow me. And if I'm alive at the end of the projects that I'm working on now, I really can't wait to show you. Thank you.